About 3 years ago, a young woman from Oregon noticed some unpleasant eye irritation. She checked herself out in the mirror and noticed small, half-inch long, wriggling white lines squirming around in her left eyeball. Over a 20-day period, she manually removed as many as 14 worms, pulling them out of her eye with tweezers or her bare fingers. The woman also visited her doctors during this time period, showing them the worms, and as any good doctor would do, they sent a sample off to the CDC, which identified the worms as Thalassia gulosa. These small parasitic worms are typically found in the eyeballs of cattle. The worms spend part of their life cycle on flies of the Musca genus, which buzz around the face and neck of cattle, and feed off of their tears, or more generally, off of any salty, nutritious fluid around the eyeball. These flies are pests for cattle, not just because they get in the way and can damage the eye, but also because they can deposit these parasitic worms. The worms will hatch and grow inside of the fly's digestive tract, and then they'll travel to the fly's mouth parts, where they can be deposited from the fly onto the hapless cattle, into its eye. Once deposited, the worms will burrow into the eyeball, where they cause irritation, inflammation, pain, and in really bad cases, corneal scarring and even blindness. Now, this young woman from Oregon was the first reported case of Thalassia gulosa infection in humans. And the news that I want to bring you today is a report of the second case of Thalassia gulosa infection in humans. This time in the eyeball of an older woman from Nebraska. She reported that one day in March 2018, while visiting Carmel Valley in California, she went outside for a run, and after rounding a corner, she collided with a cloud of flies. Some CDC officials who worked on her case reported, quote, "She recalls swatting the flies from her face and spitting them out of her mouth," unquote. Shortly thereafter, the woman began to feel eye irritation, and rightfully assuming that something was in her eye, she tried to flush it out with tap water. Perhaps she thought it was an eyelash, or a speck of dust, or something like that, but she was horrified to see a 13mm long worm come squirming out of her eyeball. Upon closer inspection, she found and manually removed another worm. But despite this, her eye irritation remained, so she went to the doctor, and they found and removed yet another worm. Again, the eye irritation persisted, so she went to another doctor, but they couldn't find any more worms during that checkup. But she went back home and flushed her eye again, and this time was able to get a fourth worm to come wriggling out. And after this, the irritation in her eye finally subsided. The woman's case has been researched by parasitologists at the CDC, who wrote up a report that was published in the journal Clinical Infectious Diseases. In their report, the CDC researchers say, quote, "The reasons for this species only now infecting humans remain obscure," unquote. And the reason they say only now is because these flies and this parasite have been known to be living around humans and farms and stuff for decades, but human cases have, until now, been unknown. The researchers continue, saying, quote, "That a second human infection with T. gulosa has occurred within 2 years of the first suggests that this may represent an emerging zoonotic disease in the United States," unquote. So that's kind of creepy. It's still too early to say with absolute certainty, but it does seem like this species of cattle eyeball parasites are adapting and becoming more comfortable infecting humans. If this is true, and these cases aren't just random flukes, and let's be real here, 2 cases happening in a relatively quick time frame relative to the total time period of human exposure, that suggests that this is not random. And so if this is true, then we could be looking at a new human eyeball parasite. So that's fun. Only time will tell if things get worse, in which case we'll start to see more instances of this Thalassia gulosa parasite infecting human eyeballs. This is cool, but pretty freaky for two reasons. First, it's cool because it's another example of the ever-evolving, ever-adapting tide of carbon. It's a case of evolution in motion. If things get really out of control, then perhaps some kind of bacteria riding on these worms will also adapt to infect us, and so we'll have some kind of super parasite that's using our eyeballs as the point of entry into our bodies. Second, it reinforces the fact that humans are animals, and we're just like any other, that we're integrated into this earthly biosphere. We are at the mercy of parasites adapting to infect us, and we can only hope that our big, sophisticated brains will allow us to develop some kind of vaccine or anti-parasitic drug to help get rid of them. But in the meantime, be careful to avoid getting flies near your eyes, and if your eyes start to get irritated, be sure to regularly check them in the mirror, because you might just find a few new wiggling friends squirming around in there.